Welcome back to the Thrivecast, episode 11.
Woo!
Welcome to the Thrivecast. Noel Thompson.
What's your name?
I'm Jeff.
I'm Olivia.
And I'm Pete.
Welcome back. We're so happy to have you here with us.
Episode 11.
Who is our very, very special guest today, gentlemen?
Angus.
That's right.
That's
Senator
right.
Angus King.
Senator
Our
Angus
United
King.
States Senator.
Right. We are not on a first name basis with him, but sounds like Jeff is.
I think we might be by the end of the interview.
Absolutely. So we are really, really excited that we have Senator King on the podcast today, and we want to make sure we give him all the time in the world. So we don't have much to talk about in the beginning, and we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have our interview with Senator Angus King. All right, and here is Noel with a little bit of a bio about our Senator Angus King.
Senator Angus King is an American politician and attorney and has been serving as the junior United States Senator from Maine since 2013, a
Political.
Independent since 1993. He was the 72nd governor of Maine from 1995 to 2003. Senator King was born in Alexandria, Virginia. He graduated from Dartmouth College in 1966 with a BA and the University of Virginia School of Law in 1969 with a JD soon after graduation from Virginia. King entered private law practice in Brunswick, Maine. He was a staff attorney for Pine Tree Legacy
Legal
assistant in
Skowhegan.
In his free time, he enjoyed exploring the Maine outdoors, either on his Harley or with his family in their camper. Please welcome Senator King.
Hi, it's Angus King. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Hi, welcome, Senator King.
Hey, Senator King, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? It's a little chilly this morning up here in Maine.
It really is.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Hi, my name's Olivia. I work here at Strive. We'll all go around and introduce ourselves.
Okay.
Who are you?
Noel Thompson.
This is Noel.
Hello, Noel.
Who are you?
What's your name?
I'm Jeff.
This is Jeff.
Hey, Jeff. Aren't you related to my friend Olympia Snow?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, well, okay. I know who you are.
Oh, yes.
Hi, Senator. It's Pete Brown.
Hello, Pete. Good to hear you again.
Nice to talk with you this morning. Jeff and Noel are the hosts. And then we also have Whitney, who's our producer of the podcast, and Ryan, who's a Strive U alumni who does all of our editing and the sound and the behind-the-scenes magic to get us so people can hear us.
Thank you so much for being a guest.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to be with you. Now, I want to know if you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yep. Good.
Great. So we have, it's pretty, I'm sure it'll be pretty easy lifting for you. And the guys have a several just kind of regular questions, if you will, and then we do a little bit more fun and fast-paced lightning round.
Okay.
So
I'll do my best.
Okay. So who's gonna kick off?
Jeff has the first question, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, Jeff.
What is average day like as a senator?
Oh, that's a great question, Jeff. And the answer is there is no average day.
Of course.
Every single day is different. Here's how the day starts. The night before, when I go home from the office, I'm given a 3-ring binder notebook, just like you guys have when you're in school. And in it, it has the schedule for the next day, everything that I'm doing. And then it has a lot of memos about everything that I'm doing that give me the background. And then it has things I have to make decisions about. And then it has sort of general articles and things that I might be interested in. And then it has a whole bunch of letters that answer mail that come from people in Maine. We get between 3,000 and 5,000 emails and letters a week.
Wow.
In our office just from Maine. So that's the beginning. The next morning I get up and there's the schedule and I just go. It's a lot of meetings. I have hearings with my committees in the Senate. I have committee meetings. I meet with people from Maine. And by the way, let me just say right now, every Wednesday morning at 9 that the Senate is in session, anybody from Maine is invited to my office for coffee and really good blueberry cake.
Ooh.
So keep that in mind if anybody is down in Washington for a conference or visiting or touring or whatever. We have a really nice little sort of reception. Every Wednesday morning I'm there and my staff is all there. So like I said, there's no typical day, but it's a lot of meetings and usually goes till 9 or 10 at night.
Wow.
For example, the other, it was Wednesday night, I think, or no, Tuesday night, I had dinner with a small group of senators and Bill Gates, the famous Microsoft guy, and fascinating evening talking about healthcare and education and energy and a lot of other issues. So there's no typical day, but it's intense from usually about 7 in the morning, 7:30 to 9 or 10 at night. And then I come home Thursday night. I got home last night. I come home Thursday night, and I'm here in Maine on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I go back to Washington usually in the middle of the day on Monday. So I'm in Maine 3 or 4 days, in Washington 3 or 4 days, and I spend a lot of time on airplanes.
Wow. Well, we'll definitely take you up on that invitation to have some coffee and blueberry cake too. Right, guys?
Yeah.
And from Bill Gates to the Stripecast.
Right.
That's it.
One
That's
of the
it.
same. All right, Noel has the next question.
What do you think the biggest issue is for the U.S. right now? What about Maine?
Well, I think the biggest issue for the U.S. is not quite as serious in Maine. I think the biggest issue for the U.S. right now is how divided we are. We've got our politics has become so bitter and divided. It's really harming the country, I think. And probably one of the most important things we could do is simply to come together, to listen to one another, to respect one another, and try to solve the country's problems. Now, I don't think it's as bad in Maine as it is in some other places. We have people of strong opinions on all sides, but Maine people seem to be a little more, the word I use is civil, a little more sort of nicer and more respectful. I have people come up to me on the street, and sometimes they disagree with me, but they're not mean about it. And that's a good thing. That's what Maine is all about. But nationally, I think the dividing of the country into tribes is not a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff?
What does the Armed Services
Committee
do?
Well, we're in charge of all of the military, of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and our job is to help guide them as to what they should be doing, what they should be preparing for. We also are in charge of deciding where the money should go for defense. In other words, should we buy tanks or airplanes or ships, and how many, and what can we afford? And we do a lot of what's called oversight. Oversight is a very important part of what Congress does, and it basically means checking up on what the federal government is doing. It means, it's just what it sounds like, oversight, watching over, and we'll have a general from the Army come in and we'll say, okay, well, let me give you a good example. We had a hearing just this week on the Navy, and it was on how many of your ships are ready to sail at any given time. In other words, how ready are we? And if it takes, does it take too long to repair and maintain ships? And how do we improve the number of airplanes or ships that are available and not sitting in at a dock somewhere or on an airstrip unable to fly? So that's what our committee does. We're in charge of sort of the overall policy of defending our country, and it's very important work, and it's a work that I take very seriously, and I spend a lot of time on those subjects.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your work on that committee and all the other committees that we know that you're on as well. It's really amazing.
What is your largest goal for 2019?
I think there are several. I can't just say one. One is to keep working on the opioid problem in Maine, which is one of the most serious problems we've ever had. We're losing about a person a day to an overdose death, which is tragic and just awful for families and communities, and it's really been terrible, particularly in our small towns and the rural areas. It's just an awful problem. So I've been working on that pretty much since I came to Washington. We passed a big bill that helped just about a month ago, and I'm proud to say it passed. Remember, I said that division in the country was a problem, but here's a bill that we passed. I think it was 99-1. And everybody agrees this is a problem, and I hope that it's going to help. So that's one priority. Another priority that I've had and continue to work on is veterans. Yeah. Maine has a lot of veterans. We have, I think we're like third in the country in proportion of veterans in our population, and they've defended us. They put their lives on their line for us, and they deserve to be well treated by all of us, and particularly by the government. So I'm working on that, getting more help for them. For example, I, along with a group of my colleagues, got a bill passed about 8 months ago. I think it was that long ago now, to pave the way for building a new veterans health clinic in southern Maine, in Portland. And it's going to be a big deal, and I think it'll be a really good health medical facility, especially for veterans, so they don't have to travel so far for their care. So working on veterans. And then I think there are two others. I'm sorry to talk so long, but two others that I've...
Great.
The third is we've had a lot of big losses in the paper and forest industry in the last 5 years. We've lost paper mills that employed a lot of people up in northern and central Maine, particularly in small towns where there isn't much else. In other words, there aren't a lot of other places for people to go for work. So Susan Collins and I, my Senate colleague, and Bruce Poliquin when he was in the Congress, and I'm sure Jared Golden, the new congressman, will join us up there, and Shelley Pingree, have all been working on helping to rebuild that forest economy by helping to find new products to make from trees and new things that we can do to create jobs up there. So those are all main things. Those are the main things that I'm working on. And then the final one that I had a meeting on just the other day, I'm worried about our national debt. We're borrowing too much money, and you young people are going to have to pay it back. And I'm really concerned about that. And there's a small group. We had a meeting in my office Wednesday afternoon, and we talked about, what are we going to do about this and how are we going to tackle it? It's a very tough problem, but somebody's got to start talking about it, and I guess I'm going to be one of them.
Well, thank you so much for doing all of that. That's incredible.
That sounds like a full plate.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and in my spare time, I'll work on world peace.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Jeff?
What upcoming legislation is there that might impact people with disabilities?
Well, here's where we want to start, and I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think if you were watching the news last week and 2 weeks ago, you know that we lost President George H.W. Bush, that he died, and we had a very moving funeral service for him at the National Cathedral in Washington. I was there along with pretty much all of my colleagues. In fact, one of the person I sat with at his funeral was George Mitchell, the famous former senator from Maine, and it was an honor to be able to spend time with Senator Mitchell. But the thing you need to know is that George H.W. Bush, President Bush, was the signer of the original Americans with Disabilities Act.
Oh, wow.
Which really changed the world for people with disabilities on all levels, and that was one of his major achievements of his time as president. So I think we ought to stop and pause and thank him for what an incredible piece of work that was. The second thing is I'm a big defender of the Affordable Care Act, which is an effort to provide. It really does two things. It helps people to get health insurance who couldn't otherwise afford it. And last year, I think there were 70 or 80,000 people in Maine who got their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And secondly, it requires that health insurance really cover things.
Right.
And for people with disabilities, one of the biggest issues is what's called pre-existing conditions.
Yep.
And in the old days, if you had a pre-existing condition, in other words, some health problem before you came to buy your health insurance, the insurance company could say, we're not going to sell you insurance, or we're not going to cover that condition, or we're going to charge you so much, you couldn't afford it. The Affordable Care Act requires that insurance companies cover people regardless of pre-existing conditions, which is a very important life-saving provision for people with disabilities, and so that's been one of my big projects since being in the Senate, is protecting the Affordable Care Act, because unfortunately there are people that want to repeal it for reasons that I still can't really figure out. Why anybody would want to take health insurance away from people, I don't get. But in any case, so those are two things that I've worked on, and I've also been a staunch opponent of anybody that wants to try to undermine or weaken the Americans with Disabilities Act. I had a very good friend in Maine who had been in a terrible car accident, and for most of his life was in a wheelchair, and he really taught me to think about what it's like to have a disability. And I never forget realizing that, to me, the steps up to the City Hall in Portland were just steps, and you just ran up them when you needed to get up there. but to somebody on a wheelchair, if there's no ramp or elevator, those steps are like Mount Everest. They can't do it.
Absolutely.
And so we need to constantly sort of keep that in mind, is that, you know, we're all children of God, and we're all brothers and sisters, and we have to look out for one another.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for all your work, really. I know I keep saying that, but it's just so important.
Have you met President Trump, and how he is different from TV?
Is he different from TV at all?
I met him for about 30 seconds. I've only met him once, so I can't really say. It's a sort of funny story. I was at the White House with other senators for a meeting, a briefing on some issue. I can't remember what it was, and I was waiting around for the meeting to start, and I walked over to this guy in the corner, and I said, "Is there a bathroom nearby, you know, that I can use?" And the guy said, "Yeah, right in there through that little room, you know." So I went in, and when I came out, there was President Trump in the little room, just, you know, waiting for this meeting to start. And that was a little, you know, confusing. And so I walked up to him and put my hand out and said, "I'm Angus King. I'm the senator from Maine." And his immediate response, and I'm not making this up, was, "Central casting. You look just like a senator." That was it. And then, you know, the two of us turned and, you know, went into the meeting. And I felt pretty cool. I said, "Wow, the President of the United States thinks I look like a senator." And so I called my office and said, you guess what the President just said? And one of my people sent me an article, and the title of the article was "Central Casting," because it turns out he says that to everybody.
Really?
That's one of his most common comments. So
Man.
I felt pretty cool for about 15 minutes, and then after that, but that's my one engagement with President Trump. So I really can't tell you whether I think I got to tell you, I think what you see on TV is who he is. I mean, he's not. To say he's unscripted is an understatement.
Right. Sounds about right.
Okay, Jeff?
So who do you think should run for president?
Any suggestions?
Oh no!
If you had your choice.
There are at least 20 people running, and I don't have any preference. I know a lot of them. A lot of them are my friends in the Senate. There are 4 or 5 people in the Senate who are at least thinking about running. I really don't know. I just hope it's somebody who's good and can speak to the President Lincoln used a wonderful term, the better angels of our nature. I've always thought that people have good sides and bad sides. And some people appeal to our bad side, and some people appeal to our good side, to our better angels. And I hope there can be somebody who runs for president that appeals to our better angels and our hope for a better future rather than our fears and what divides us. So I don't know who it's going to be. I have no idea. But it will certainly be a challenging couple of years. And, of course, all of us are going to be watching carefully.
Absolutely.
And sort of as a follow-up to that, Noel?
Yeah.
If X, would you consider being a vice president candidate?
Yeah. If they asked you, would you want to be the vice president?
Well, there's a famous quote, I think it was from Bob Dole, who said, the vice presidency is not a bad job, it's indoor work without much heavy lifting. So yeah, I can't answer that question. I think it's very unlikely. So I'm not going to speculate. Like I say, I think it's pretty unlikely. But I do understand there's a nice house that goes with the job. So, and by the way, before we go on, Jeff, I want you to please give my love to Olympia. She's one of my favorite people and very important part of Maine history. So please tell her I said hello. Will you do that?
Yes, Angus. I will do that for you.
First name basis.
Thank you. Absolutely. That what Jeff just said is important, because as I travel around Maine, that's what most people call me.
Yeah.
They don't say Senator, they say Angus, and I like it because that means they think I'm their friend, that they know I'm their friend, and not some guy with a big title that works far away. So Jeff, I'm Angus, man. You and I are in there.
Well, we certainly practiced a couple times saying we're not going to say Angus, guys. We're going to call him Senator.
No. I like it better, Angus.
Okay. So Jeff,
if you could be an
ambassador
to
another
another
country,
which country world would you pick?
Well, I think I'd pick two countries. I think in the winter I'd pick the Bahamas, and in the summer I'd pick Norway.
Ooh, yeah.
How about that?
Great answers.
No, that's a really good question. This time of year it's pretty hard to think of. You want to say someplace warm, but I don't know. Frankly, I've never thought about that. That would be being an ambassador. I've been to a lot of U.S. embassies in my travels with the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, and I think. To tell you the truth, if I could choose, I think I'd say China.
Wow.
Because I think it's such an interesting and important country, and I'm just hoping that we can develop friendly and peaceful relations with China as it grows, so that we can avoid conflict. So I think perhaps one of the most important jobs would be ambassador to China. It would be challenging, and the Chinese people are. We had a Chinese foreign exchange student who lived in our house for a year.
Wow.
When she was in high school, and it was really fascinating to learn about her country through her, and it was also fascinating to see her learn to ski and do some stuff that she never would have done in China.
Yeah, I bet. Well, we'll certainly have Jeff and Noel keep that in mind when they, run as president and vice president in 2020. They'll have Angus be ambassador to China.
Yeah, there you go.
They're about Angus.
Where is your favorite place in Maine?
Oh, I can't answer that question. I can't favor one place over another. I'm going to give you a kind of politician's answer. I really do honestly like a lot of different places. I love the coast.
Yeah.
Being on the coast and out on Maine's islands is just unbelievable. But Mary and I have a small RV, and we use it to travel Maine on long weekends. Haven't had much of a chance to do it much lately, but places like Greenville and the new Katahdin Woods and Waters Monument up around Millinocket. The Gulf Haggis is a really cool place. It's like the Grand Canyon of Maine, Mount Kineo. I mean, there are just so many wonderful places, and Christmas shopping in downtown Portland in December is kind of cool too. So I can't possibly choose a favorite place, but my overall favorite place, you ready for this, is Maine.
All right, good answer.
Jeff?
You
used
to host Maine Calling, and you also have a podcast. What radio advice you have for us?
Well, I think the first thing is to keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great, and the questions are really good. And I think you got to do your homework, and it's obvious you guys have. You've got to prepare and think about, okay, what am I going to ask, and and what do the people want to know? Here's the best advice I can give you, and it's what I used to use when I did my TV show. I would try to say, what would my viewers ask if they had the chance? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Try to think about what would your listeners want you to ask if they had the chance, if they were sitting in your chair, what question would they ask of Senator King or Senator Collins or Donald Trump or whoever? And that's a good guide, because what you're really doing when you ask these questions and when you host this show is you're representing the people who are listening.
Right.
And you're trying to get information that would be interesting to them. So I think that's probably the best advice I could give is do your homework and think about what your listeners would like to know.
Awesome. Well, I'm taking notes. I'm writing that down. Do your homework. All right. I think those were all of the traditional questions that we had. And now it is time to move into everyone's favorite segment of the Strivecast, the lightning round. And Senator King, we have a bit of a theme song for this segment, so I'll let Jeff and Noel take it away. You guys, it is time for the lightning round.
Lightning round. Lightning round. Lightning round. Lightning round. Lightning round.
All right, we're a little on the low tech side. So.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about this too, to tell you the truth. I don't know what's coming.
We'll give you a couple of choices to choose from, and you tell us which is your preference.
Correct.
Augusta or Washington, D.C.?
Well, it depends on for what. If it's for big, beautiful white marble buildings, it's Washington, D.C. If it's for friendly, nice people, it's Augusta.
Good answer. Okay. I like that.
Jeff? The Blaine?
Blaine House or White House?
Oh, man. Well, I didn't live in the Blaine House when I was governor.
Oh.
I lived Mary and I and our kids stayed here in Brunswick, and I commuted every day to Augusta. So we never lived in the Blaine House. So, I don't know. The Blaine House has a good pool table, but I understand the White House has a bowling alley. So, you tell me.
So Noel just perked right up. Yes, you're right.
Campaigning or fundraising?
Campaigning or what?
Fundraising.
Oh, fundraising is the worst. Campaigning is fun. Meeting people, talking to people, listening to people, which, by the way, is the most important part of it, is a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. But fundraising is tough. I mean, it's hard to call people and ask them to give you money. I mean, it's just it's not a good. Our system has too much money. It requires too much fundraising. It takes too much time away from campaigning and talking to people, and it's something I'd like to do something about.
Yeah.
But that's an easy one. you could have said walking on nails or fundraising, and I would have.
All right, here's a hard one.
Yeah,
Jeff?
tricky one.
Motor home or Harley?
Oh, that is hard. How about this? Depends on the weather.
Ooh,
good call.
Good answer.
If it's raining, I want the motorhome. If it's not raining, the Harley's a great way to see Maine, and I always like traveling, particularly on back roads. And here's something about motorcycling that you may not know. One of the cool things is you can smell the countryside when you're on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
If you drive by a farm, you can smell fresh mown hay. You can also smell a cattle barn, by the way. But there's just something about a connection to the countryside that's really cool about motorcycling. The other good thing is you can't take a phone call when you're on a motorcycle.
Absolutely.
House of Cards or West Wing?
House of Cards or West Wing?
Oh yeah, no, that's easy. West Wing. House of Cards is too dark.
Yeah, it
The
is.
thing, and I don't like. Here's the thing. I don't like House of Cards because it gives an impression of Washington that people think is true but isn't true.
Right.
It's not nearly as dark, and people aren't as mean. Plus, as I've said, I've never met anyone in Washington as smart as Frank Underwood.
Very conniving.
But but West Wing is more hopeful,
Yeah.
and I think actually more realistic. One of my oldest son worked in the White House under President Clinton, and he says that West Wing was amazingly accurate in terms of what it's like there.
That's good. I'm glad it's not like House of Cards.
Jeff?
Oh man, no, it isn't. It really isn't. That's what I don't like about it, because people see it and they say, "Oh yeah, I know they're all crooks and they're all, stabbing each other in the back and stuff." It just isn't
Literally.
true. I mean, yeah, right.
State of the Union, fun or
boring?
boring?
Oh no, it's always fun. It's fun to watch what goes on. It's fun to watch my colleagues, who stands up, who doesn't, to see the president trying to persuade, and it's a pageant. It's a spectacle. The whole Congress is there, the Supreme Court, the president, the vice president, and there are lots of guests in the gallery. And I always bring someone down from Maine to be in the gallery. And then there's the Senate has a dinner before the State of the Union. It's very informal. It's a buffet, and you just mill around, and it's fun to have a guest. I had last year Joyce Maker, who is a Republican state senator from Washington County, and she came down, was my guest, and had dinner with me and met the other senators. It was exciting for her, and it was fun for me to introduce her around. So I wouldn't say it's boring. It's always, and you never quite know what's going to happen, what the president's going to say.
Yeah, I bet. No?
Becky's Diner or Moody's Diner?
Well, it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
If you're in Portland, it's Becky's. If you're in Waldoboro, and it's Moody's. I also like the Miss Brunswick here in Brunswick. There are lots of good. I'm a diner guy, I like the kind of food that they serve. I got to say, the pies at Moody's are pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff?
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Milk by a mile.
Nice. All right, this one's going back a little bit to the State of the Union, kind of.
When people stand up for a standing ovation, are you usually one of the first people to stand up, or
we're one
of last?
Yeah.
It depends on what we're standing up for. If it's something I'm excited about, believe in, I jump up right away. And if it's something I'm, sort of not so sure about, then I'm a little slower on the draw. There's a wonderful picture. I'm an independent, as you know. I'm not a member of either party, so the parties generally sit together at the State of the Union, and quite often I'll just sit wherever I, can find a chair. And one year I was sitting amongst all of my Republican colleagues, and President Obama was delivering the State of the Union, and he said something about health care and how we have to strive to give health care. There's that word, strive. We have to strive to give health care to as many Americans as possible. And I jumped up to my feet and started clapping. Nobody around me stood up. None of them. And so there's this wonderful picture of me standing totally alone with all these grumpy guys sitting next to me who didn't like President Obama, and I really like that. So it's it just depends on what the subject matter is.
Absolutely. Noel, you got the last lightning round question right here. A Noel original. He came up with this one. No, right here.
Okay.
Here's
Go
the
ahead.
last one.
Oh, George Washington or Abraham Lincoln?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and the answer is both.
Yeah.
Because Washington was so important to the founding of the country, and things he did as the very first president established kind of, how the country was going to work. On the other hand, Lincoln is important because he saved the country. I don't think there's another person in the United States in 1860 who could have held the country together. And I think Lincoln, if I had to choose, would be our greatest president. Every time I read of something and learn more about Lincoln, I'm sort of bowled over by how blessed we were to have him at that time. And here's an interesting thing about Lincoln. He only had 1 year of formal schooling.
Right.
He only went
Wow.
to what amounted to the first grade. All of his education was self-taught. He read any books. He once worked for a farmer for a summer in exchange for the right to read farmers' books.
Wow.
He was a genius, and he was so understood people, and as I say, he really saved the country. You can't go wrong learning and reading about Abraham Lincoln. He once said, "Every political thought I ever had came from the Declaration of Independence." I say, every political thought I ever came from Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Wow, that's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other questions?
No. I want to thank Angus for coming on the podcast. Your friend Angus,
Thank you.
Senator King.
Senator King.
Thank you.
Hey.
Angus King.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Senator.
Thanks to both of you guys. Great questions, and thanks to everybody there at Strive for all that you're doing. You're just doing so much for Maine and for our families, and for the people that are participating in your programs. It's fantastic, and I can't leave without mentioning my friend Kay Rand, who was is my chief of staff, and she's one of the founders of Strive. She's one of the people that worked back at the very beginning getting it going, and I know she's really proud of that work, and is a wonderful person. So congratulations on what you're doing. Thanks to Noel and Jeff, and happy holidays to everybody.
Thank you very much. We've tried to encourage Kay to run for governor, but she hasn't taken us up on that yet. So
Yeah, she'd be a good one, that's for sure. She'd be good at anything.
she sure would.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
The Strivecast is brought to you by
Your ad here.
For January, we have a great deal for you. We've started to have more and more listeners to the Strivecast on all the different platforms, and we'd like you to be a part of it. So for only $25 for the month of January, you can sponsor a week's episode of the Strivecast. If you're interested, send us an email at strivecast@pslstrive.org. Thanks.
The Strivecast is brought to you by listeners like you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, it is time for the.
Question of the week.
Question of the week.
Oh, quit. Oh, okay. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
Gonna get right into it, I
Question
guess.
of the week song. So this week's question of the week is, we're going to keep it in the politics family. Why is it important to vote? Do you guys vote in elections?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Oh, yes.
To help out for the government to get the voice heard.
Yeah.
Have your voice heard by the government. Excellent.
Well said, Noel.
How about, why do you vote?
Well, I vote
Yeah.
because of my life.
Make your life better?
Yeah, in my life, way better.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Get to pick the people who represent you.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
I wanted to hear myself.
Yeah.
Have your voice be heard?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember.
Absolutely.
Who are your representatives?
Yeah, this guy Pete.
Pete, you gonna run for office anytime soon?
I am not.
Okay, well, maybe you have some
But I
voters
appreciate
you
your support.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say about voting?
Happy voting.
Happy voting. Jeff?
Happy voting.
Next time that you vote, happy voting. And we will be right back. And we're back, and it is time for the Words of Wisdom segment. And the
Yeah.
theme of this segment is
It's
going to
about
be. Go ahead.
if you're in office, stay in office and always be good attendance to yourself.
Yeah.
Stand up for yourself.
Yeah. So our theme this week is going to be stress relief. So if you're feeling stressed, you want to be good to yourself, right, Noel?
Noel, great job transitioning from the political side of the podcast to the question of the week and the stress relief side.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So when you guys are stressed out, let's give, it's getting close to the holiday season. People get a little stressed out around all of that. How do you guys relieve some stress? What do you do when you're stressed?
I sometimes take time to yourself, ride a bike, punch a pillow.
No.
Good stress relievers.
Yeah.
Jeff
What
is waving his hands in
Oh.
the air. He would like to say something.
Jeff, go on.
It's your
What do
show.
you do?
How to get rid of stress?
Yes, sir.
It's always ride a bike.
Who votes for ride a bike?
Yes, and always go for walks and always do some sports. It will help you to relieve your stress from it.
Yeah. You were talking before we were recording about something you do to relieve stress. Remember that?
Yes.
What was it?
Always meditate.
Meditate.
And breathing.
Yeah.
And you were talking something you did too.
Yeah. Relax and punch a pillow.
The other one, you're talking about doing some yoga.
Hot yoga.
Hot yoga. So, that's a good way to relieve stress too.
Some great words of wisdom with the holidays upon us.
Or kung fu.
Yeah.
Also, you can use
Fast as lightning.
head for a punching bag.
If
How about talk with a friend?
if you do some kung fu or martial arts, then that song will come on. The Kung Fu Fightings.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. That one?
Yeah.
All
Very
right.
good. Okay.
Listening to
well,
music might be a good stress relief.
Good one, Pete.
It's tying it all together.
Oh,
And that is our...
Punch someone in the ear.
No, we're not going to punch someone in the ear.
Yeah,
That was
that's our words of wisdom.
We'll be right back.
Wrap it up, 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 wrap it up.
Okay, it is time to
wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
Wrap
Noel?
it up, wrap it up.
Wrap it up, Pete. Wrap it up.
Okay.
Wrap it up.
All
Wrap it up, dude.
So we wrapped it up and then we wrapped it up again. And we just want to say thank you so much to our guest, Senator Angus King, again for coming on our podcast. That was a really amazing interview. What do you guys think? I thought it went really well.
Yes, it went very well.
And delicious, Noel said. I'm glad that you think so.
Delicious.
Okay. And I really was blown away by a lot of his answers, and we are just so grateful that he took the time to speak with us, right?
Yes, that's correct.
I learned a lot.
I sure did too.
And I know what's my New Year resolution.
Ooh, that
good.
save that because coming up we have a special January 1st show coming up where you guys will be discussing your New Year's resolutions, right?
Yeah.
We'll let everybody know your resolutions, and we're gonna have a little fun show to kick off 2019.
Is
Yeah.
that Tuesday?
It is a Tuesday. Shows come out every Tuesday, and next week
Is it this Tuesday?
Next week we have Bill Hughes, our Strive U admissions coordinator, answering any questions about the Strive U admissions process. He'll go over that and how all that works as our deadline is approaching on February 1st.
Yeah, and that'll come out on Christmas Day, so can't wait.
So we do have episodes coming out both on Christmas Day and New Year's Day, so be watching for those as you celebrate the holidays.
Absolutely. Again, thank you to everyone who is continuing to listen to Strivecast. We really appreciate it. Be sure to share it with your family and friends on social media and wherever you're seeing the Strivecast. You can leave us a rating and review as well on iTunes and all those platforms. And I think that's all we got for today.
pslstrive.org/strivecast.
Gentlemen,
Yes.
Any
for goodbye.
final thoughts?
Nope.
Beautiful day.
Beautiful
Beautiful
day. Have a
day.
beautiful
Beautiful
day.
day.
All right.
right.
Thanks
you
again to
guys.
Senator King.
Good day.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening, everybody.